Hello, everyone, and a very good afternoon. It's a beautiful fall day still, which is great. And we have an amazing event lined up today with Mark Evans. Mark is a fractional CMO. The most fun part is that he started out as a journalist, and he's going to share his journey before he talks about the brand storytelling. But I can certainly say that I have attended Mark's event earlier, and I certainly loved it. It was very, very valuable. And one of the most fundamental part of building an organization is building brand. And many a times, founders, and I'm one of them, miss out the fact that a brand outlives the product. Many a times, it's bigger than the product itself. Many times, a brand will encompass more than one product. However, we don't really go around building brand or focusing on building brand as much as we do building of the product. And it's even more pronounced if if you come from a tech background. And Mark is going to tell us storytelling as a way to build brand. My name is Kanchan Kumar. I'm a startup founder. I volunteer my time to run Tide Toronto, and we have Mark Evans today. But before we hand it over to Mark, let me take 2 minutes to tell you about Tide Toronto. Tide Toronto is part of one of the world's largest not-for-profit organizations focused on entrepreneurs. Tide is present in 61 cities all across the world in 30 countries, or that's 32 countries. And it's built on 4 pillars: education, networking, mentoring, and investments. Tide supports entrepreneurs from before they become an entrepreneur, while they're exploring the idea, right up to the scaling and exit stage. And that's done by a set of members who are called charter members. They act as mentors, advisors to you, and most of the time, these relationships are not transactional. These relationships are not built around the equity that you give it to them. That's purely based on the philosophy of giving back. And that's because most of the charter members are entrepreneurs themselves, or they are senior professionals and executives, and they have reached wherever they have reached in their life and careers because of the support which they received. And this is basically a payback philosophy, which basically helps them, which brings them to help entrepreneurs. Tide Toronto, as I mentioned, is run by entrepreneurs and professionals, and we volunteer our time to run this. We also provide financial support. We go out, get sponsors who provide financial support as well. You could become a Tide associate member for $100 per year. That's open to everyone. And whether you're an entrepreneur or you are not, even if you're exploring entrepreneurship, it's a great idea to become a member, because besides these events, there are a lot of things which Tide provides in terms of networking and mentoring and investment support, which otherwise is not available open to non-members. And it is, as I mentioned, Tide Charter membership is open to people who have experience, who are willing to give their time to support other entrepreneurs. In the fall season, we have done a couple of events, and we have a couple of more events which are lined up. The earlier events, some of you might have attended. If you have not attended, you could go to Tide Toronto's YouTube channel and you could get the recordings. We have a couple of more events which is lined up before we close this year, and we would keep sending you emails if you sign up for our newsletter, or if you're in an event, we'll let you know when the new event comes up. Before I take more time, Mark, all yours. You're on mute.
Okay. All right, well, thank you for the invitation, and thanks everyone who's attending this event. I really appreciate it. So as Kanchan said, my name is Mark. I'm a fractional CMO for B2B and SaaS companies. Oops. Sorry, let me start again. I'm good at brand positioning, strategic planning, and overseeing tactical execution. But what I really do is help companies do better marketing. And one of the ways to make that happen, surprise, surprise, is brand storytelling. But there's a problem with brand storytelling. And here it is that many companies struggle with bad or no storytelling. And you're asking yourself, well, why is that? If storytelling is so important, if people like me are talking about it consistently and constantly on places like LinkedIn, so why isn't everybody doing it? And there are two culprits here. One is that many entrepreneurs, particularly ones that are tech-based, are too product-centric. They love their products. They spend all their time developing the product. And as a result, all they want to do is talk about the product because it's based on the idea that if you build a better mousetrap, the mouse will come. And that doesn't work anymore. The other way is being feature-centric, is that it's all about the product's features and all the wonderful things it can do. And as many of you can understand, is that success, or your idea of success, will happen if you increasingly add more features, which is why software developers, when it comes to SaaS and B2B companies, are constantly pounding out new ways that you can use the platform or the product. But here's the thing, and here's what really makes storytelling important, is that your prospects and your customers don't care about your product or your features. And I say this somewhat tongue-in-cheek because what they really care about is themselves. They care about their success, whether your product is going to make them richer or healthier or faster or more productive or more efficient or help them get a promotion or help them travel. They don't care about you. They don't care about your product. They don't care about your features. They don't even care about prices. What they care about is, are you going to make their lives, personally or professionally, better? And if you can use storytelling to make that happen, then you can then talk about your product and your features and your prices. But the only way that you're going to capture their attention, the only way that you're really going to resonate and have a competitive advantage is storytelling. So let's talk a little bit about what is storytelling. So Seth Godin, who most of you should know, if you don't know, subscribe to his blog, says marketing is no longer about the stuff that you make, but it's about the stories that you tell. And that is as good a definition as I can come with. Storytelling is also a sequence of events that we can't predict. And that's the thing with sales, is that sales is not linear. We don't go from point A to point B right away. In the SaaS market, B2B market, there are often 7 people or 7 steps involved before anyone makes a buying decision. So storytelling helps to nurture, encourage, engage, educate, all the things that you can do to get people to go down the sales funnel. As I mentioned, storytelling is anything that engages, educates, entertains, encourages, and excites. The 5 E's of storytelling. So here's the question to people here. It's, why does storytelling matter to you? Like, why are you here? And so, if you want to leave a comment in the chat, just to sort of give me a sense of, what are you thinking? Like when you're here, what are the things that you want to know? So, that storytelling is important, but you don't know how to leverage it. Well, that's pretty obvious. You're trying to be a storyteller, but you're having trouble making it work. You heard it was the thing to do. You don't believe the hype, but open to hearing otherwise. And if you're in that camp, I'm glad that you're here. So these are kind of the different ways that you can approach storytelling. And these are the different ways that the people that I talk to when it comes to storytelling. So storytelling matters for a variety of reasons, and we'll get into it. One is the number 7. Now, 7 is an important number because 7 is the attention span, or apparently the average attention span of a human being. You think about it. The average person checks their smartphone 150 times a day. That's pretty crazy, right? We do not have long attention spans anymore. We are multitasking. We are skimming. We're not reading. And the sad thing is, according to research by Microsoft, which is probably an urban myth more than anything else, is that our attention spans are shorter than the average goldfish, which is pretty scary. The second number that's important is 100,000. 100,000 is the number of words a day of content TV, radio, social media, video games, text messages, podcasts, the web, the list goes on and on that you are consuming on a regular basis. And so you think about that and you think about how are you going to break through as an entrepreneur? How are you going to capture someone's attention so that they will pay attention to your product, to your message? Well, storytelling is the way to go. Stories are remembered and shared, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, because you remember the stories that people tell you. And stories also increase the value of your products. Now, the reason I'm showing you a picture of a swimming pig is it goes back to a island in the Caribbean, in which there's an island of swimming pigs. Now, you might ask yourself, how in the hell, or why are there an island of swimming pigs? Well, the story goes that there was a eccentric European entrepreneur, and he decided to populate this island with pigs. Now, the problem is that pigs are foragers, and they started to eat all the vegetation on the island, and they started to starve to death. Meanwhile, the island of pigs became a very popular tourist attraction. And as these boats would get near the island, they would dump their garbage or their food off the back of the boat. And the pigs saw the food, and even though pigs can't swim, the pigs decided that they would nevertheless try to swim. And over the years, these pigs learned how to swim. So this photograph, this is an actual photograph. And once the photographer told the story to the buyer of this photograph, the value of the photo went from $10 to $100 just by the value of a story. And that's why storytelling matters. One of the reasons why storytelling matters is that it enhances the value of your product. It adds luster to your brand or your product that you can't get anywhere else. The other thing is that stories make the complex simple. So this is a photograph done with an iPhone on GE's Instagram account. And it's a photograph of a turbine, a very complex industrial turbine. And what GE does with storytelling through photographs is that they make their technology and all the industrial machinery accessible through storytelling. So you could, even if you're not into industrial machines or don't understand them, you can understand the beauty of a GE machine and maybe why you might want to buy one. And most important, stories make people do things. At the end of the day, marketing for the sake of marketing, storytelling for the sake of marketing doesn't mean anything if you can't make people do things. So stories make people cause reactions, which is great. So they make people feel something, which we'll talk about. And as important, stories cause transactions. And that's why we're in business. At the end of the day, we want to leverage storytelling and all the other tools so that we can make money. But wait, there's more. The other thing about you have to remember when it comes to putting storytelling in context is facts don't matter. And I know for people who are engineers and software developers, facts are facts. But when it comes to consumers, facts don't matter. Stories matter. And the reason I say this is that according to a Stanford study, stories are up to 22 more times memorable than facts and figures alone. So imagine, or when you used to go to conferences and you had a great speaker, what did you remember? The speaker's facts or the speaker's stories? It's always the stories. And you can wrap facts within a story, but good speakers are great storytellers. The other thing is that in storytelling, and here's something that it's going to be hard for you to believe, but it's true, is storytelling is easy. Think about that for a second. Part of the reason why many entrepreneurs don't tell stories is they're intimidated by storytelling. They don't think they can do it. But the reality is we're all storytellers. We do it all the time. In fact, according to a study by an English university, we tell 60% of our conversations every day are stories. Stories about what we did on the weekend, stories about the television shows we watch, stories about celebrities, which we call gossip. We're always storytelling. And so we are all storytellers. We can all do it. We just have to think about being a storyteller. Now, let me show you how easy it is to tell stories. Now, keep in mind that I spent 20 years as a reporter for the Globe and Mail, the National Post, and Bloomberg News. So I am trained as a writer and a storyteller. So I see storytelling all around me. So here's just an example of how I craft stories. I needed to get a new set of eyeglasses. So I went to Clearly on Queen Street. So I ventured into downtown where there was nobody there. And I had amazing customer service. They were very attentive. They spent an hour making sure I got the right glasses and the right frames, and I had an eye exam, the whole spiel. So what do you do if you're a marketer? What do you do if you're me and you go through this experience? Well, of course you tell a story about it. There's no, so I wrote a post on LinkedIn about the value of great customer service and how it equals great marketing. It's a simple story. It really is. I mean, it's just me telling a story about getting eyeglasses. And you think about it, that's a pretty pedestrian story, but there are stories, interesting stories everywhere. And you may or may not find the story interesting, but it does provide some insight into marketing and how marketing happens every step along the sales funnel. So just a small example of storytelling. So when you look at storytelling ideas, and it could be buying a set of glasses or going to a rock concert or going for a great meal or a great product that you buy, you start with a story idea and then you figure out the different channels where you can tell it. So you can tell it on a LinkedIn post. I could have turned that story into a blog post or a video or even a photo, right? So there's lots of different ways that you can tell stories in different ways. And so what I'm trying to say is that storytelling is a way of thinking. And this is a fellow named Jordan Bauer, and he is a storytelling consultant in Vancouver. And that is it in a nutshell. Storytelling is mindset. You think about storytelling all the time. Everything has potential stories. So whether you're telling B2B stories or SaaS stories or consumer stories, you're always looking for that angle. How can I talk about something that might be interesting to my target audiences? So just a little bit, getting into that. So going back to the idea that everyone's a storyteller, and the idea is that everyone has to be a storyteller within your organization. So of course, marketing is all about storytelling. If you're not storytelling as a marketer, well, you're not doing your job properly. That's the only way that you're actually going to make your content interesting, compelling, engaging, and inspiring. Salespeople are natural storytellers, or they should be natural storytellers. They should be telling stories that are engaging, that get a prospect excited, that get them inspired to consider your product. They should be telling stories all the time. And most salespeople are natural storytellers because they're usually not talking about product. They're talking about customers using the product and how wonderful the product is and creating those use cases. Customer success and customer service people have to be storytellers. They're talking to clients all the time. And so they have to be crafting stories about your brand and your product and your customers and use cases and things like that. And then everyone else within your organization has to be a storyteller too. And that's HR or people, the secretary or your administrative staff, or even your delivery people. It's all got to be telling stories. So they've all got to know your core story about what you do, who you serve, and why you're unique. And if they all know that story, that's great. So a couple of things to remember when it comes to stories. Here's some storytelling pillars. Just a couple of things to think about when you're telling stories. This guy's name is Jay Baer. He's a content marketing consultant, and he says stories have zero intrinsic value. And you think about that. I've been talking to you for about 20 minutes about stories and storytelling and why it matters and the importance of storytelling. And all of a sudden, this guy says his stories have no intrinsic value. And the twist is that the story isn't what matters. It's what the story creates that matters, and that's emotion. Now think about it that way, right? People make decisions based on emotions. So the other way to think about it is that we see ourselves as rational people who have feelings. Rational people who have feelings, so thinking machines that have feelings. And really what we are, we're feeling machines that think. So go back to it again, right? Thinking machines that have feelings, but really feeling machines that think. So we make decisions based on emotions. We decide what to buy. We decide what to eat. We decide what to wear based on how we feel about something. And not initially logic. But then we might kick into making a rational decision. After you've got over the emotion of a product, then you think about the price and the features and the benefits. So just give you just one quick example. I suspect that many people listening to this presentation have a MacBook or an iMac, or want to buy one of those new MacBooks that they announced yesterday. You buy an iMac not because it's a better computer. You know, Lenovo, Dell, Toshiba, they all make computers that are just as good as a Mac, and probably even better and much less expensive. So why do you buy an Apple product? Because it's the way you make you feel. Now you can argue they're better products and they're better designed and all that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, it's the way it makes you feel when you buy one. When you have an iPhone, you are cool. You are part of the tribe. You are part of this creative group of people, and people self-identify with being an Apple user. And that's emotion, right? And so Apple played off this perfectly with the PC versus Apple television commercials that ran for years, where Apple made fun of PCs. And ironically, they brought back the PC yesterday for that big launch event where they launched the M1 chip. So, this is the guy telling that PCs run faster, then he gets tired, right? So again, it's about emotion. Another thing about emotion is think about BMW versus Toyota, right? So BMW, you own the road. You are king of the road, which is why BMW drivers probably drive like crazy people most of the time. But when you own a Toyota, it's a comfortable, safe, reliable car. It's about feelings, right? If you want to feel like you own the road, you buy a BMW. If you want a convenient car that looks okay, you buy a Toyota, right? So again, it goes back to feeling. So one of the things you might want to do when you're brainstorming with your group virtually, or maybe, I guess not in person these days, is you want to think about how does your brand or product make people feel? So it's almost like a game of kind of like bingo. So you have to go through these different emotions. And this is a key part of your storytelling and your marketing and your sales for that matter, is trying to figure out what do you want people to feel when they see your advertising, or they talk to your salespeople or your customer success people or your customer service people. This is really important to know how your marketing and sales need to be crafted, how you have to position them, right? Stories are also about experiences. So as I said earlier, it's not about the product, it's not about benefits or price, it's about the experience that your product delivers. So you think about, this is the former head of Airbnb, or capturing life's most exciting moments and sharing them with others. It's all about what a product's supposed to do. So think about a couple of things, right? So this is Airbnb, right? Now think about the story that Airbnb tells, right? They don't talk about the fact that they're a convenient online service to book places to stay anywhere around the world. When we were doing that, what they position themselves, or the story that they tell, it's the ability to feel like you belong everywhere, anywhere. The ability to experience different people, different foods, different places. They never talk about being an online booking service. It's all about the experience. And you look at how their marketing and how their services have evolved, is that they are now promoting services. So this is an Airbnb experience. So if you're in Montreal and you find a place to stay, you can do axe throwing as an experiment, right? As an experience, right? So it is about experiences. So it's what people do when they're using your product. So for example, if you're selling bikes, you don't sell the idea that it has 24 gears and great brakes. You sell the idea that people can climb over mountains or go on these great mountain biking trails or get fit or whatever you want to do. It's about their experiences and what they want to go through. So an exercise that you should think about when you're trying to craft your stories, when you're trying to get yourself into a storytelling mode, is what I call 4-word stories. And this is something that you can do over Zoom with your team, or if and when you ever get together, is that it's a mindset game, right? And it's fun. It's a little bit challenging, but it's not as challenging as you think. What you want to do is you want to describe your company in 4 words. So for example, Pinterest. What is Pinterest in 4 words? So think about what that might be. And I'm just making these things up. This is the things I did. And there's no right answers to these questions. Pinterest in 4 words is organize your favorite things, right? So you're telling a small story about Pinterest that is interesting, right? It's curious. So what do you mean organize your favorite things? A lot of you may use Square. So what is Square in 4 words, right? So Square is run your business anywhere. Again, right? Simple story, easy to understand. It begs the question, so tell me more about this. And that's what a story is. A story is a series of chapters. And finally, just for fun, Tinder in 4 words. And there's lots of ways you can go these days, but the politically correct thing would be it's how people meet, right? a nice simple story. So once you got your forward story, right? Once you think about your forward story from a storytelling perspective, and all we're trying to do here is just get into a storytelling mindset, it's all about what's your 10-word story. So expand your story into 10 words that should include what you do, who you serve, and maybe why you're different. But if you can't fit in maybe why you're different, then you fit it into your 25-word story. And then if you can go through this exercise, 4, 10, 25, then suddenly you've got a story. And you can call that story elevator pitch, you can call it a brand positioning statement, but that's what storytelling is all about. It really is focusing on something that's very accessible, that's engaging, that makes people feel curious, but it's just one slice of storytelling when it comes to connecting with your target audiences, right? It's all about them and what they need to know, not about you and what you want to tell them. That's the difference there. So let's go back to what's your story. And there's a guy named Donald Miller, and this is an interesting graphic, which is why he describes storytelling as a journey, right? And so this is another way of thinking of storytelling. So storytelling starts with the character. So that's your customer, right? That's the person, you can call it an ICP or your ideal customer, whatever you want to call them. That's the person that is going to buy your product, the ideal customer for your product. They have a problem, right? Whether it's they're trying to be more productive, they're trying to make more money, they're trying to go on a trip, they're trying to buy a new computer, and they meet a guide, and that's you. And you're the guide who gives them a plan. Now, the plan needs to be engaging. The plan is ways of steering them in the right direction, is ways that you can communicate to them why your product or service is the best option possible. And stories are the way to make that happen. If you can engage, educate, entertain, encourage through storytelling, then what you get to do is you give them a call to action. If you believe what we're telling you, if these stories are captivating, then here's what you should do. And if you do this, there are two options. One is this journey will end in success, or this journey will help them avoid failure, right? So you're trying to give them these two scenarios that in the ways you can help them. That's Donald Miller's storytelling guide, and it's storybrand.com. He's written a series of books. If you're into storytelling and you want to learn sort of the fundamentals of storytelling, I encourage you to check him out. But let's talk a little bit about storytelling themes. So we talked about the value of storytelling and tried in the mindset of storytelling, but let's get into sort of some of the different ways you can tell stories. And this is not going to go terribly in depth because that's another presentation for another time, but just give you a slice of how you could approach storytelling. So there are different themes when it comes to storytelling. Now, depending on where you're at in your journey, from early stage startup to small business to mature company, there are different stories you can tell. So for example, there are origin stories. These are the stories about how your business got started, and people love origin stories. They want to know what was the inspiration for your business. So no matter if you're a new company or a small business or an older company, that origin story is a great way to connect with your target audiences. And an example of that is Pez dispensers. So the story goes that eBay was started because the founder of eBay his girlfriend at the time was into Pez dispensers. She collected Pez dispensers. So he wanted to create a mechanism where he could help her buy and sell Pez dispensers. And so that story was made up by eBay's PR person, and she sold that story to Entrepreneur. They bid on it and they ran with that. But the story is not that story at all. The founder of eBay wanted to start a marketplace. That was it, an online marketplace. But it's a great example of an origin story that became from myth to reality, and it was told over and over and over again. And in the early days of eBay, that was a story that was a key part of their sales and marketing. Another example is Richard Branson with Virgin Airlines. So the story goes, and this apparently is a true story, is that Branson was on his way to the Virgin Islands to meet a young lady who eventually became his wife. And he got to his stopover destination and the plane was canceled. And so there were all these passengers who were stuck at the airport. And Branson, being Branson, found a chalkboard and chartered a plane and walked around the airport with a chalkboard advertising 39-pound flights to the Virgin Islands. And of course, he sold the plane out, being Branson. And that inspired him to start Virgin Airlines. It's a very simple story, but it's a great story. It's a powerful story. It's a story that's very engaging, and it adds to the mythology of Richard Branson, the entrepreneur. Stories can also be used for corporate updates. We're all trying to make progress, and we're all go through the motions in terms of, hey, we got this new product, we got this new feature, we're appearing at a conference. And we have to think about corporate updates as not being something boring and something sort of run of the mill, like, okay, we're just going to announce this thing. You got to think of it as a story. So the classic example is Intercom. So Intercom, which I'm sure you know, this Irish company raised a Series C round, a $30 million Series C round. So what do? Do they issue a press release saying we're excited to announce that we've raised $30 million from, venture capitalist A and B? No. What they did is they created a cartoon. And the cartoon announcing the $30 million was so popular, they turned it into a video. And the video was so popular, they turned it into a presentation, which became an ebook. And that's the power of storytelling, is that if you can do stuff, you can leverage storytelling to make the boring interesting, to make the run-of-the-mill intriguing and entertaining, then you've leveraged storytelling. Then you're doing storytelling in all the right ways. Storytelling can also be about your challenges. One of the things as entrepreneurs is that we think that the world wants to see happy stories, wants to hear success stories all the time. But the reality is, and you know these as entrepreneurs, is business is hard. There are lots of ups and downs. And so the way that you personalize your brand, the way that you build empathy and brand affinity is you tell stories about the struggles, the ups and downs. So if you're a company like Groove and you're Alex Turnbull, you write a blog post about the story we haven't shared, how our startup almost died. This is a very personal story, but it's a true story. And it's a story that engages people because it's different, right? And it's a story about personal struggle, and we all struggle personally. And Groove is selling to a lot of startups, and this builds connections with them. Your people stories, right? So you've got lots of interesting people internally, so celebrate them and talk about the things that they're doing to support their communities. For example, this is Salesforce, and they're talking about all the things that they do in terms of the trips that they take and the fun activities that they do and where they work and all those things. So you've got to look internally as well to look at, like when I was at a company, for example, one of the employees made a big climb up Mount Everest, not to the top, but made a big climb, and we celebrated that and we put it on LinkedIn, and we built a lot of brand affinity from people who thought, wow, this might be a cool place to work, to people who just thought that was a good story. So leverage what you got internally. And of course, tell stories about your customers or about being a customer. These are classic case studies, but case studies, again, if you leverage storytelling, you can make case studies interesting, because most case studies are pretty boring. They're pretty run of the mill, problem, solution, results, formula, pretty boring day in, day out. But if you're a company like Airbnb, what you do instead of case studies, you tell stories about Judith. And Judith is a host in New York. And this is a story about all the people that she's met along the way, how it's changed her life, impacted her life, and helped her develop new friendships. And that's just another example of good storytelling. And of course, ideally, there's stories about your customers, right? So GoPro, the realities for GoPro is that most of GoPro's marketing is powered by customers who submit their videos or share their videos about all the amazing things they're doing. This goes back to my original point about experiences, right? GoPro could position itself as a company that makes rugged, small cameras, but they don't do that. What they do is they tell a story about how GoPro allows you to capture life's adventures and share them, right? That's the GoPro story. Because if you buy a GoPro, you're going to be doing some amazing things. And then if you do some amazing things, then you're going to want to share them with your friends and family and with the world at large, right? So that's the other thing. And the final thing, just the other slice of storytelling to talk to you about, is the idea of data-driven storytelling, right? So it's the idea that you've got tons of data inside your company, and you should leverage it. So for example, when I first started my business, I worked with a company called Sysomos, and we did social media monitoring. So we were monitoring Twitter, Facebook, all the big social media platforms, and we had tons and tons of data. And what we would do every quarter is that we would take a deep dive into the database and come up with some simple stories. So one of the stories we told early on was that 20% of Twitter users accounted for 80% of activity. And we had a few other sort of data points, and we did a blog post, and we got tons of coverage because we turned data into a story. And just give you an example of this in action, and this is Zillow, right? So this is a study they did on where millennials can afford to buy. So they went into their data. This is a real estate company based in the US. I think they're expanding into Canada. And they looked at all the data and they came up, this is a story. Like, you have to think about storytelling in different ways, right? So this is a great story of where millennials buy. So if you're a millennial and you're interested in buying a house, this is the places where most millennials are buying houses, where they can afford to buy a house. Again, a great example of storytelling. So I think the overarching message here is that storytelling does matter. Storytelling is the way that you engage, encourage, excite, and inspire customers. And frankly, it's the way that you give yourself a competitive edge over companies that aren't telling stories. And storytelling is an easy thing to do. It's something that we can all do as brands and individuals. And then there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to leverage the power of storytelling to drive our businesses forward. So if you are interested in learning more about what I do, or interested in asking me questions, you can email me at mark@marketingspark.co, visit my website, or you can text or call me. So if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But otherwise, thank you for attending the session. Got a question from Andrew Churchill. First of all, love the focus on thinking about how you want your audience to feel. Very smart question. When I was in sales, private school mission, all I did was tell stories and they worked. Now, when it's my own work, hard to do. Why is it harder to tell stories about your own work than it is as observers of work of others? Or is it just me? I think, Andrew, it's just you. But I mean that in a very polite way. We all do very interesting things. So the stories that you tell are about the stories that about your customers, for one thing, or how you're building your business, or the struggles that you're having building your business, or how you're growing your business. So for example, it could be how you've decided to, you realize that video is super important. So you decided to take a crash course in videography, and then you spent the weekend taking this video course, and you met these really cool people, and something led to another. Like, there's a story. There's lots of stories in what you do to run your business, to grow your business, to learn, or there's stories about your customers. And we should be telling stories. I mean, it's easier when the stories seem abstract, when they're less personal, but personal stories are really powerful, because as a small business owner, like, most people are small business owners buying from a small business owner. So you have to make it a very personal connection. And so the more if they can know things about you and what makes you tick, and the ways that you're trying to grow your business, I think that's a very powerful place to be. Any other questions that you want to ask?
Mark, while more questions flow in, I have a question. Do you have a preference over what kind of, or do you have a data or your experiences as to what kinds of stories work best when it comes to selling to businesses or B2B sales?
That's an interesting question, because I don't think you can say that any channel is better than others. It really depends on how well you leverage it. But I would say that the underlying sort of theme is stories about your customers. It's about them, stories about their questions, their experiences, the things that they want to do, the thing that they're aspiring to do is very powerful. But the reality is, in this day and age, video and photographs are the way that you connect with consumers, especially millennials and Gen Z, which is very digital and very visual. So as your B2B brand, you've got to think about, obviously, the millennials, but you've got to also start thinking about Gen Z, because the lead, sort of the back end of the Gen Z is in the early 20s right now. So they're working, they're the hunter-gatherers, they're the people doing a lot of research. So that's something to think about. Another question, stories get attention, are remembered, but why do listening to stories convert to a buying decision? Well, that's an interesting question. So what you're trying to do through storytelling is, especially when it comes to B2B, is you're essentially trying to nurture and engage your audience for an extended period of time. Because unlike consumer purchases where the buying cycle may be very short, B2B and SaaS sales, tech sales tend to be longer, could be weeks, if not months. And so how do you constantly or continually flow information to them that's engaging and interesting? Because otherwise they're going to get bored. You know, like we've all received drip email marketing campaigns that are super boring after the second email. But what if you're telling a series of stories on that? The other thing about storytelling is that there are multiple people involved in an enterprise sale. And so you've got to tell different types of stories to different people. But it really is an engagement tool because every brand is easy to forget unless you're constantly reminding prospects and customers that you're still around. And the best way to keep their attention is through stories.
That's a great point. And in fact, I would want to get a little deeper into SaaS sales. SaaS sale, like you mentioned earlier, happens to be multi-step process. It hardly ever happens that you reach out to a buyer, they would see the product and buy. And so does that mean that there are different stories crafted for different stages of sales or for different buyer personas? Because typically SaaS have multiple decision makers as well.
Absolutely. Stories happen in different shapes and sizes. So for example, if you are trying to capture the attention or engage with people who are what I call the hunter-gatherers, they're the people doing the research, they're trying to get a lay of the land in terms of the competitive options and what should be considered. So first you got to capture their attention. And so you got to be doing different types of marketing that are top of the funnel, that are user-friendly, that are accessible, that get people into the funnel really easily. So it's maybe it's a little more creative, maybe there's some entertainment factor, there's a little more sizzle, but as you go deeper into the funnel, you're dealing with decision makers. And the decision makers don't have time for ebooks or going through your website or things like that. What they want fast, they want easy, they want accessible. So maybe those people might be, the stories that you might tell might be on a short video or a quick sales deck, or even a one-page brochure that's beautifully designed. And that's a story too, because you got to think of everything as a storytelling opportunity. So a brochure doesn't have to be, here's our information about our company. It can be something creative, right? Because think about how much information is coming at people and what's going to make them stop. What's going to make them say, hey, this is different. This is interesting. It could be storytelling in different shapes and sizes. Got a question about how would you suggest we balance telling different stories to different audiences, B2B and B2C, while keeping the messaging of the brand consistent? Should the backbone of the stories be the same, or is pivoting okay? So what I suggest is that you have your core story, and it really comes down to the 3 variables, or maybe 4 variables. One is, what do you do? Who do you serve? How are you different? And how are you unique, right? So how are you different from the competition, and how are you unique? And so those are the core fundamentals. And then what you can do is you can create different versions of that story based on your target audiences. So as long as you have the focus in place about the 4 fundamentals, then your story can vary, but you don't want people telling different versions of the truth, right? So you have to have consistency in terms of the stories that you tell. So your salespeople have to tell the same story as your customer success people, as your marketing people, but the platforms that they use can vary. But I think the storytelling applies in the same way, whether you're a B2B company or a B2C. It really comes down to how do you capture and keep the attention of consumers.
Interesting point. So that basically means that we also have to be cognizant of the fact that the attention span is low, and people won't really want to listen to a longer story, but the story which is relevant at that point in time. Does that mean that when we're talking about a sales funnel, the medium of story could also change, not just the story while the theme remains the same? That somewhere it is a visual, which is storytelling, somewhere it is a video storytelling.
Absolutely. So one of the things you have to think about, or one of the things you should actually do when you're creating the buyer's journey, is you have awareness, consideration, decision. So There are different channels that you use in awareness. There are different channels that you use in consideration. And they may blend a little bit. There may be some blurring of the lines. And there are different channels that you use when people are making a decision. Now, at the top of the funnel, when it's awareness, it's all very accessible, all very easy. There's storytelling about customers and about the experiences that are all something you definitely got to do, because what you're trying to do is get people excited or curious or interested. As they go into the funnel, what they get more interested in is about the product itself. So they understand that this is something that can help them do what they want to do. So they've got a job to do or they got a trip to take. But once they get into it, then you got to tell stories about how your product actually works and how people are using it. And that's a different type of story, right? But like you think about for a SaaS or B2B company and the classic how it works pages, and people just go through the motions, right? Do this, do this, do this. But those are great. What if you told a story about how a customer goes through their day using your product, right? So it's a narrative as opposed to just facts. And going back to original answer, and then at the end of the funnel, the bottom, it's really like that's a hardcore focus on the product, right? But you do want to interspice some customer stories because you got the decision maker and he wants to know that he's not making, or she is not making the mistake. So blending in some customer success stories among the facts is also a good thing too. There's a question about how do you fix the damage caused by a story that falls flat? The simple answer is you reload and you tell different types of stories. So the thing about marketing and storytelling, it's all an experiment. Like you have a hypothesis, you put it out there. Anybody who tells you that marketing is a sort of a form of science, or the data can drive marketing, is basically leading you down the wrong path. It's just an experiment, and some of the experiments work and some of them don't. And the only way you're going to find marketing success is constantly experimenting. Like if you are trying to play it safe all the time and you're not doing things that push the boundaries or a little bit out of the box, then you're going to fail because you're never going to do anything creative or interesting. And the same with storytelling. You tell a story and it falls flat. So I'll give you a perfect analogy. When you see Jerry Seinfeld or Chris Rock on stage and they are hilarious and every joke they tell, every story they tell is great, you think these guys are natural storytellers. That's wrong, because what they've done before they hit these big stages is they go to all these small clubs and they're doing their bits and they're doing, they go and they do their things. They're keeping the stuff that people laugh at and they're throwing out the stuff that doesn't work. But we never see that, right? And that's the same thing with marketing, is that the stuff that works, the stories that work, you keep them and you tell them over and over again. And the stuff that doesn't work, you move on, right? But it's not a mistake. It's just part of learning. Another question is there a preferred social media platform for B2B tech companies? The answer that I'm going to give you now is probably different from the answer I was going to give you 8 months ago, and that's LinkedIn. LinkedIn has changed dramatically in 2020. And for B2B companies, it has become the platform to drive engagement, thought leadership, storytelling, connections, and most important, conversations. So it used to be seen as the place where you look for a job, or if you went on LinkedIn, all these HR people were hunting you down, and that was boring, and I didn't use it. But this year, it's a totally different beast. And so you should definitely be checking out LinkedIn. It's not a sales platform. People are starting to use it as a cold outreach sales platform. And if you do that, it's not going to work for you. And I'd be happy to talk to anybody about LinkedIn. I've become a big believer in the platform. So if you have questions about LinkedIn, please let me know.
Interesting. Do you also see LinkedIn being used? I mean, okay, so let's just put it other way. What are the brands that you have seen, or B2B brands that you've seen use LinkedIn as a good storytelling medium that you would personally like?
So I would say that there are a lot of tech brands doing it well. There's a company called Gravy that you should check out that is doing it particularly well. And the CEO is very active on LinkedIn, and he's telling stories about the company's growth. And creating great content and engaging. So there's lots of them for Zoom, but most people I follow on LinkedIn are individuals, and lots of entrepreneurs are building out very strong profiles. There's a question: how can you elaborate on how LinkedIn is used as a B2B platform? Well, there's some pretty obvious ways here, but one of them as a content platform. So it's about writing posts on LinkedIn, not articles. So posts are, 175 to 200 words, and as an entrepreneur, you post on a regular basis. That's the way that you deliver insight, thought leadership, engage your customers, make people aware of the fact that that's brand building, all those good things. The other thing about LinkedIn, from an entrepreneur's perspective, it's about connections. And we've all got tons of connections, and that's what LinkedIn is great for. But it's being smart about your connections, being strategic about your connections, and trying to align yourself with people that could be prospects, could be friends, could be influencers. But the big thing I would say is it's about conversations. And that's the most powerful thing, or the best thing I've done this year, is that as I've been engaging with people and commenting on other people's posts and connecting with people, I've looked for opportunities to have conversations with people. And so I've talked to people, like my business used to be in Toronto, and that's all I served, and that's all I wanted to serve. And now, because of conversations through LinkedIn, I've got clients in California and the UK and across Canada. And that's the way it's, at the end of the day, content, comments, conversations are the big three. It's gravy, gravy that you put on turkey. Yeah, gravy.
Now, another question. I know there are quite a few founders in this group. How powerful is storytelling for investors or fundraising?
Very powerful, because facts are facts. Think about it. Like when you're pitching an investor and you say, well, these are our 1 year, 3 year, 5 year projections. All that is just those are stories. Those aren't even real stories. Those are like, that's the stuff that, in an ideal world, under ideal circumstances, we're going to be able to achieve this kind of growth. And you can take her to leave it for what it's worth, right? But the way that you actually craft great stories is that you paint a picture of the opportunity and the needs in the marketplace and the way that your product's going to deliver, and that's how you build drama and excitement about the potential for your product. It really isn't about your product's features or benefits. It's about this big opportunity in front of you and the big need of consumers and how you're going to solve it. And one of the things, if you're interested in this type of investor focused presentations, there's a guy named Andy Raskin. It's Raskin. And if you do a search of the greatest deck ever built, or the greatest storytelling deck ever built, it should come up. Just look for it, because it's a story that he wrote on Medium that got huge amounts of coverage. But it was about this deck that is the epitome of great storytelling. It's a company that raised a ton of money, but they did it in a very unconventional way. So search for that. If I'll take a look for it. If you can't find it, ping me and I'll dig it up for you.
Yeah, I remember having read that. He talks about this promised land as to how do you define a promised land and craft a journey towards promised land, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's like, it's one of these things that he wrote, and I don't know whether he knew it at the time, but it's become a big hit. I'm just looking it up for you here. It's the greatest sales deck I've ever seen. That's the title of the post.
Yeah, I remember having seen that.
Yeah, great read.
Awesome. That's a great pick. Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Okay, and Andrew Churchill. Thank you, Andrew. You've put it up on the in the chat.
Perfect. Going back to one thing that you mentioned when someone asked about stories falling flat. So you're basically saying that stories are also something that you A/B test, right? And the ones that really works are the ones that perpetuates.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it really goes back to knowing your customers inside out. And it's been interesting over the last 7 months on LinkedIn, as a lot of marketers have spent a lot of time talking about the value of knowing your customers. And this is marketing 101. Now, why they're all pounding the table about knowing your customers is is a bit curious, because we should be talking to our customers all the time. We should know them inside out, whether it's through net promoter scores or surveys or taking them out for lunch or doing Zoom calls with them or onboarding calls. And a lot of stories really are about answering their questions, addressing their needs, solving their problems, helping them, inspiring them to meet their personal and professional goals. And that's the value of storytelling. So classic example of great storytelling was a content marketer, and his name escapes me at the time, but during the 2008, 2009, when the economy was really going down the drain, he was building Marcus Sheridan, and he was building swimming pools. He had a swimming pool company, and his company was getting killed. And so what he did is he wrote a series of blog posts answering his customers' questions. And those blog posts become increasingly popular, a lot of SEO juice, and people started buying his pools, right? But it's just one example of being very customer centric, and storytelling is driven by your customers. Just think about it. You tell stories to an audience. And just like when you were a kid and you sat on the floor and your kindergarten teacher read you a book, the stories are interesting and there's drama and you don't know what's going to happen next. But it's all about the audience's needs and what they want to hear. And I can't repeat this enough. It's really not about what you want to tell them, because as entrepreneurs, we spend far too much time talking about things that don't matter to our customers. They matter to us, but they're not as important to our customers as we think.
And before we let you go, one last question, which is about, you touched upon it briefly, and I think this example as well. How do you use storytelling in customer support, customer engagement? Because they're already your customers, they possibly already know about your product. What value do you think we drive through that?
Well, I would say that we tend to take our customers for granted. Most companies take their customers for granted. We spend a lot of time attracting customers, nurturing them, getting them to sign on the dotted line, and then we don't tell stories to them afterwards, right? We pretty much ignore them. We send them a newsletter, email once in a while. But storytelling for customers really is about two things. One is to inspire them, and is to remind them that they made this great decision to buy your product, and to keep on reinforcing the idea that this product is perfect for their needs, and that look at all these other customers just like them that are enjoying success with the product, so they feel good about buying the product, right? You don't want them to ever feel like they're not getting value, or you're not paying attention to them. The other thing is churn, right? Like for SaaS and B2B companies, churn is a killer. And so one of the ways to avoid churn, in addition to great customer service, is to keep on telling stories to them, stories about their success, stories about other customer success, so that they don't want to leave, right? They're happy. You're constantly engaging them with ways that they can use your product differently, or even better, use your product more, so that you actually get them to get more value and hopefully pay more money for it, right? That's the real value of telling stories to your customers, right? So, like going back to my example of Clearly, right? Is that you're telling stories everywhere along the line, right? You're telling stories from the time you touch a customer to the time they're in the fold and they're a happy customer, and you never stop telling stories. Yeah, and somebody's put a link in the Q&A for Andy Raskin's blog post. So that's a must read. If you want to know about storytelling, if you want a good example of storytelling, read that. It's a very entertaining read.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Mark.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm always happy to talk about storytelling. One last thing, just for people who are curious about what I do, I work with companies in different ways. One is as a fractional CMO. So I'll be your in-house marketing leader who works on a part-time basis. So you get experience and expertise without full freight. The other one is as a strategic advisor. So working with you and your teams, providing you with strategic counsel, and making sure that you're doing the right kinds of marketing at the right time. And I also offer coaching services. So for entrepreneurs that want one-on-one coaching to help move their marketing forward, or help them get a better understanding of marketing and the opportunities, I do that as well. So you can reach me through any one of those ways, and I'd be happy to answer any questions along the way if people want to reach out.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for attending this. Keep an eye on email. We have more coming this season. Thank you and have a great evening.
Yep. Bye, everyone.
Bye, Mark.